yeah, that is the moment, like a final 20 minutes or so, just to share. And what I reflected about in the last minutes, I thought that we even though we fought on speaking about aesthetics, the mobility of aesthetics, we even more spoke about the mobility of artists, I would say. Starting with the keynote by Günter Heged and this term of transit existence, that leads us to reflecting about the possibilities and the desire of mobility of artists or within the cultural world towards the question of the need of having a base or reflection about mobility. So we, in more or less all the panels beside that beautiful contribution right now and Nina's one, we fought on thinking about mobilities and the conditions and the context where the artists work on, and we said, okay, what are these conditions really to produce in artistic work and to share with the audience, and what does it mean then to shift narratives within a local context or with an audience or so. So that for me it was really like an ongoing circling, meandering around these issues, and that does not lead really to a synopsis of the conference for me, but that is now the moment just for you also to share what you would say was striking you most, or should have been said before, and you would use the opportunity just to let us know within the last minutes, even to point us to an experience or a question you might have. Yes.
First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for this conference. I was immobile this morning. I went to the wrong venue, so I missed the first panel. That was a really interesting experience to see things are not that clear. I have an observation from yesterday and today. Yesterday we had a quite heated discussion at the end with Wojtek, almost getting very clear on situations about pointing out a negative phrase of what else could we have been discussing instead of bringing an example. I guess we all remember this situation. It was, for me, a day with a lot of the examples from Belgium about the internationalization or the new forms of artist work in the international sphere. And then today's beautiful examples of from Petersburg and also from Novi Sad now gave me a balance that we should not look away from locality because we want more internationalization. And yesterday the feeling was there, we should get more of this. It is a growing factor, and we can see it in theater festivals that there are the same 20 companies presenting the works because they are co-produced with a sort of international festivals where, in a way, the repertoire is done by those 20 companies, which you can see all over the world in the same setting. So it's sort of unification by internationalization. So you have more touring, but you see the same stuff everywhere, if you understand what I mean. And it's and the upcoming showcases of, I was 2 weeks ago in Minsk with the Belarusian showcase, or the Lithuanian ones, or here in Poland, they show often much more interesting local works. And my question is in this balance between more international approaches, which actually don't lead to more variety of works, the opposite. It reduces the amount of works. And now the very particular examples from today's discussion, how precise you can work with localities and how interesting that is. And I think there we are in the middle of a political debate where it is hard to say, like Wojtek says, I like the borders to be clear because I want to make works for this Polish, whatever you call it, identity or questions about the Polish history. And I think it's a very interesting and important issue if you look in today's political agenda in Europe, but also across the world with elections coming up, where the question is who actually has a word for locality from another side than a nationalistic approach. And I think this conference showed a bit of the complexity of this, which needs to be continued.
Yeah.
Now I'm a translator only, so I'm going to say what Nastya just told me. Being a theater director and creative person, she has two issues to discuss with you. The first one is that she complains we didn't discuss any background, you know, that we're talking about migration and mobility and crossing the borders or, I don't know, destroying the borders or building the walls like it's something new. And she says about Brecht and Pescarter as being most obvious people, you know, who crossed the borders in the 20th century, but we have a lot in Russian history as well. And, you know, Mikhail Chekhov, who crossed the border and left Russia and influenced the US acting style, but he was influenced by Hollywood as well. And there are a lot of names, you all can name them, being national or international. So the point is that it would be nice to go deeper, you know, in the history and to discuss it, like in a context, not trying to put it like it's only today's point of view and something like brand new. And I agree here that it's not. And the whole history is about migration and moving and crossing the borders. And the second thing was that it would be nice to discuss mobility of aesthetics, yeah, not political issues, financial issues, economics, you know, I don't know, climate change, the world hit, and things like that, but to talk more about how it really influences what creators are doing. That's it. And using the mic I have in my hands, I wanted to continue the yesterday talk about the borders. What Wojtek said yesterday touched me deeply because I, being a trainer myself, I now conduct social choreography workshops all over Russia and sometimes abroad. I try to work with a group of mixed people, like I try to unite together professional and non-professionals, mentally disabled with physically disabled, teenagers with their parents, and so on. And I find out that every time that borders are very important because we have our bodies and we are limited due to it. We are limited both mentally and physically, and the border is something we can't, you know, contradict. But the main thing is to control the distance, not to destroy the borders, because borders are necessary to survive. And if we don't, like mentally disabled people sometimes don't feel their borders, and it's a disease, you know. But if they feel their body, if they start to build the borders, they have to find their convenient distance. And distance is about communication, and distance for me is always about art, because we say in Russia that art is about destroying the rules and building the distance. That's it.
And I want to add my concern about I can see a danger of repression of a word in this direction of mobility, because of all of us want to be understood clearly we more go to the direction of, to use choreography, visual arts, etc. We try to avoid translation, direct translation of a word, but I think that only a word can deliver complexity of our modern life, of different challenges we have. So yeah, this is my concern. Thank you.
I just want to react about what you have said in regard to productions that are touring, and we have a feeling that it's the same at the end when it comes to let's say the art market. However, I think we should not forget that also we have the luxury maybe of going from one place to the other and seeing that those things are the same. Because for the people who are staying in a certain place, having those or being able, especially in performing arts, to assist or to watch those performances not only on YouTube and so is an experience in itself. So this was one point, and the other point I wanted to raise was also if we didn't have this luxury of being mobile, we wouldn't have been here gathered somehow. So it's also about the mobility of the knowledge that we are sharing. If we weren't here, we wouldn't have known about those beautiful experiences that are very site-specific in regard to territorialities and so. So I wouldn't oppose those two things. And I think this was mentioned yesterday, like opposing the mobility of the productions and going and so on, and moving around, and the fact that we need more local productions. I think, again, that both are important and they should not be opposed and to each other.
Maybe I will add that, of course, like mobility as a movement, it's like part of the human condition from the beginning, I guess, and we are not able to discuss it in 1 day and a half. I would repeat after Julia that there is no mobility as itself, as a mobility. I think it's more kind of an approach or the focus on other activities. So that's why I guess we discussed finances, artists, and yeah. So coming back to translation, I wanted to say that when we started to organize the conference and we said our colleagues in the office that this will be the topic of the conference, there was already some confusion, how should we translate it in Polish? Because to be honest, mobilność in Polish sounds really bad, sounds like an awkward translation from English, and still we didn't find the proper word in Polish. So I guess that shows that the confusion around this word, and that on one hand it seems so well known and it circulates it came with the EU grants, with the EU policies, but at the same time maybe it's still a bit distance for some people in Poland. I don't know if I express myself well. Maybe not so familiar for some people in Poland. This is from Polish perspective and from the perspective from our office. So okay, I will maybe give the floor to somebody else.
Yesterday, there were some discussions and some opposing views on this emerging aesthetics being or not being in flux. That was the key word at certain point. And I just, because the last presentation also brought some thoughts in dialogue with my presentation yesterday, I think what kind of emerged as this flux, it's not this kind of whatever space where everything can happen and that has no categories and no definitions, but I think it's certain kind of what's the word? I will actually use the same word as I shared with someone yesterday. Like this kind of spaces being hacked and then being hacked again. So here on flea markets we see like there is certain function of a space, there is certain production pattern of the space, but then something like a new aesthetics come in and turns it upside down and carries it somewhere else, and it slips out and it kind of gets another phase and like a representative layer in terms like in the way that it's existing as an appearance, and then it goes back to this kind of more defined and more stable patterns of articulating and representing itself. So anyways, that's what I maybe, and we can maybe talk about flux in these terms. That it's not something where what has no definition and no rules and no structures, but it's something that kind of surprises you, and yes, something like that. I'm sorry. I had some thoughts.
I also wanted to add to that. Yes, today I also, I mean, when we're choosing someone on paper, so like your presentation and Milana's, of course, it's always like, yeah, you see it and you see some similarities. But today it really struck into my head as well, as I have to say that, of course, as you said yesterday, there's a creation of space, and this space is, if I use your term, in flux, and this fluidity, not used in a sense of Bauman, but really in a sense of creating a process of existing spaces that you can't define. It's the same with Milana's flea market when she says the products that came there came from the GDR. So this is not really Serbia. This is another country and not their history, but another one's history. And it's the same what you said about the hairdressers yesterday. It's not coming from the background of any Arabic country, but it's something new created in the space of Brussels that is done there. And it's very, very micro space. And what I had in mind yesterday and also today with the flea markets is actually this space is much more similar in Brussels to what we have in Germany, in Neukölln, and it's a very similar area, I guess. So there's some kind of globality also in these micro spaces that seem to be so fluid, but actually they are stable in a way that they are similar everywhere in this world too. So it's difficult to say that we go just to one direction or the other direction. That's why we ended up this discussion today with the question of stability and instability. That's what I wanted to say. And also reacting to actually Christy, what she said yesterday about the processing, and also today, it's always some kind of process. There's no best practice. That's not what you can find in this discussion probably. And this is also what Michael actually wanted to say probably. We are meandering around this. Do we find a solution? We won't find it. Of course we won't find it. We find many examples of those who try to do good things on stage and bringing people together and creating dialogue and finding a form of cooperation in work that brings people on together. And this is not meant in an ideal or idealistic way, but really this is what a theater might do for the stage and for the people. And maybe this is something that we wanted to come out today. Of course, it's not just a question of aesthetics, it's always a question of politics. You can't leave it out. That's what I have to say, especially not in these times. It's not possible to discuss this just without what's happened or what's happening at the moment. But that we come to this end, more or less positive end in this case, that we have to search and we have to find ways. Just that.
But
sorry.
yeah, thanks very much, Christine. So now it's 20 minutes past 12, and I will ask to end up here. And I think there's a lot or nothing more to say what Christina at the end said. I would like to thank everybody here for joining us, and I would like to give my special thanks to the organizer, and especially also Edita and Christine, who grabbed all these thoughts and brought it together in these, also in the input groups at the ITI with Thilo and Erhard, and here within the Zbigniewa Institute. And I would like to thank to those who hosted the different panels and discussions, like Attila and others, and Anna. And yeah, thanks a lot. And I hope you enjoyed the performance starting at 1. And I wish everybody to have a safe journey back home, or quite a good stay and work, and new artistic relationships here in Warsaw or wherever you are. Thanks a lot for joining the conference.